Skills for effective educational advocacy. So some housekeeping rules. Please keep yourself muted. Um, and we'll have opportunity for questions at the end. You can always put information that you want to know about in the chat. Feel free to use chat to make comments or ask questions. And then if Heather's monitoring that, so if she finds something that's timely, she'll address that. We're not going to go into personal details because sometimes that takes extra time, and this is recorded, so it's going to be available to others. So we'll just keep those things close. There's always opportunity to contact one of our family resource specialists after the training. And let us know if you need any help by turning on the closed captioning. If you need help closed captioning before the session begins, we can help you out with that. So in the chat, let us know who you are, your role if you're a parent, a professional, another advocate, your experience with the process, and what brings you here. Give you a second to do that. So we usually like to start with the mission of the Peel Center, and that is to educate and empower families to ensure that children, youth, and young adults with disabilities and special healthcare needs lead rich, active lives as full members of their schools and communities. Our objectives today include describing the principles of educational advocacy, discuss ways to identify and clarify your concerns, explain the process and strategies for educational advocacy, and identify dispute resolution options that are available. So we're going to have you head back to the chat and add a word or words that describe advocacy for you. Okay. So what is advocacy? We're looking for a definition here. And from Boulder Advocacy, where we have a link right there, it's any action that speaks in favor of, recommends, argues for a cause, supports or defends, or pleads on behalf of others. Now, the Peel Center is a parent training and information center, and per our grant, the PTIs are in place to empower families to be their child's best advocate. It's not necessarily that we, the staff at Peel, are going to advocate on behalf of someone, but that we empower the families by giving them information and resources so that they can become their child's best advocate. If you've been around, you know that advocates come and go, and at any time you could lose that. If you're using someone to help you with that, you could lose that person. Here in Allegheny County, we lost 3 advocates this summer when their program closed down and just stopped. So families have to know how to effectively advocate for their child. And like we often say, the disability doesn't go away. So you're going to be advocating beyond just school. So these are skills that families are going to need to know as their child grows, goes into different systems, is requiring different services. So this is for you. And it always starts with the family. Families lead the way to prepare their child for the future. We don't have a retirement plan, right? Our kids are in school. They see their teacher for that year. Teachers have a retirement plan, right? We don't. I have a friend who would say that, our retirement plan is when one of us frankly dies. So um, we want to put this on a better note. So we're going to say that, it's always been families that have advocated for um, increased advocacy. You look at the park consent decree, started with families. In Pennsylvania, you look at the Gaskin settlement, started with families. Um, the word family is mentioned, I think it's over 400 times in IDEA. So, family is the core of advocacy and the constant in the child's life. So that's why I say, advocates come and go. You can't always count on that person to be attending a meeting with you. Um, while it makes things easier when someone else can take that role, you also have to be the one that knows what those laws are, whether it's education, whether it's, you know, something to do with waivers or medical assistance. You have to know those ins and outs. And families are partners in the relationship with educators. Again, IDEA has a huge focus on families. And in fact, families are equal partners in IEP meetings. And I often try and share that with families just because um, sometimes we feel inferior in those meetings. We have a lot of teachers, a lot of professionals that are sitting at those meetings, but we have unique perspectives and unique talents that we bring to that team. So we are equal partners. So this seems obvious, right? Why is it important for you to advocate? But again, you know your child best. You know when something isn't or isn't working. You know what works for your child as an individual. You are living with your child day in and day out, so you have those ideas to make things better or know what works for your child. And again, one of the most important things that we bring as a parent, as a family member to the IEP team is that vision for our child. I know I would often feel that I had to say at the beginning of IEP meetings for my son Andrew that he has a lot of potential, and I expect that that's what's going to be considered and thought about when he is working on his goals. Is that potential? And the experiences you have are valuable and can be used to improve uh, things in the school, outside of school, the information that you can provide to a team, whether it's a school team, whether it's an IBHS team, um, a meeting that the supports coordinator is having. Um, what you have to say is equally important or more important um, than anyone else on that team. And again, we think about the vision that the family has for the child, the student. Um, no one else can see that vision as well as the family. Um, again, we all have um, some ideas of what we want for our child. We want our child happy. Um, but, we are the ones that we have to live the consequences of anything that happens in education, anything that happens in the community. We're the ones that are going to have to support those consequences when those services are done. So we do have to share our vision with the team and have a vision. Prepare early. Get the schools where the professionals buy in for the vision. So you have to share that with them to get that buy-in and let them know that we're working together to educate and support the child to move toward that vision that we see for them. I'm going to be honest here. When Andrew was in school, I didn't think about him driving. That wasn't something that was anywhere near our radar. Um, because of challenges that he had, while he was in school. But, as he was in high school and there were needs that we saw he had, we as a family saw that he had, um, we really wanted him to have travel instruction, um, because we knew, if he worked, this was going to be something that he needed to have. Um, School was not in agreement. So we did go to due process. Um, the hearing officer was a bit surprised that it was such a singular and small issue, but the school wasn't budging. Um, we did prevail in that case, and lo and behold, Andrew's 25 years old, decides he wants to drive. Well, the information that he gained during that travel instruction, while it wasn't specific to driving, the information that he gained about um, safety on the roads and being aware of your surroundings, those all played in. So at that time, without knowing, we had this vision for him to be safe and have effective transportation or travel, but it did play into something that was even bigger. So to start with this vision, or think about this vision, um, Heather's going to share the student snapshot. And this kind of gives you an idea of what's that vision going to look like? What is my vision for my child? And we can think about the ways that the school can help. And one of those ways is by presuming competence. Um, Kids, they grow, they learn, they're in school to learn. So presuming that they are understanding, they are retaining information, these are things that we want to ensure that the school is doing, as well as us doing at home, presuming competence. And we have to share the vision with the team. Um, Again, open communication, getting buy-in from the school. This is what we want to see from them. And staying engaged. We hear time and time again that um, parents who are involved, families who are involved and engaged in their child's education, the child does better. So this plays into special education as well as general education. So stay engaged, whether that means, attending, um, school conferences, or being the homeroom mom. If you don't have the time with that, just sending an email to, the student's teacher asking how things are going, or, is there anything we can do at home? Can be helpful. So we think about, how are we going to do this? How are we going to stay engaged? And what are those approaches to successful advocacy? And I will tell you that, you know, the PO Center, being a parent training and information center, these are things that we've found work for us as family members. These are things that, we've gotten information from other PTIs. So you might have other groups or other advocacy organizations that have ideas about um, approaches to successful advocacy. So this isn't an exhaustive list, and these are just some things, some ideas that we've found that are successful in advocating for your child. And it starts with effective two-way communication. So being effective can mean a lot of things. Um, it can mean that you know who to get involved in conversation, who's the right person to be contacting regarding different things that might be going on. Um, it's easy to have a point person, but you want to make sure that that person is the one that can answer any questions you might have or be able to share information with. So that effective communication, what's the best way to communicate? As a parent, you may have um, a specific way you like to communicate. Maybe it's texting. So let that be known to the other folks on the IEP team that this is the most effective way to communicate with you. Um, whatever way that might be. Keep the focus on the child. Um, this isn't, like a war of wills between two adults. This is about focusing on the child, the needs of the child, and how to get those met appropriately. So, some folks bring pictures of their child just as a visual reminder that the team is focusing on the needs of this individual student. Um, Sometimes schools like to bring up, or, others, people in the meeting like to bring up, about the other children in the classroom. That's okay, but at this meeting, we're focusing on this individual child. Encourage team members to be open minded. Sometimes, as parent advocates, we're attending meetings and conferences where fantastic ideas are being shared, or on Facebook. You watch Julie Costin, and you might see some things that really resonate with you that Julie has mentioned, and want to bring those to your IEP team. So we encourage our team members to be open-minded. And eh, I think that, being assertive in that way, while it's difficult, um, is really going to help you grow in your advocacy, in your effective advocacy with your team. You don't have to sit back and be, you don't have to be the student on that IEP team. I have a friend who calls herself the CEO of her son's IEP meeting. So it's okay to be assertive. We're not talking about being aggressive. We're talking about asserting what we want for our child and the best ways that we think that can happen. So by telling your team to be open-minded, um, that's being assertive. Sharing things with them that you found that might be helpful. Maybe they won't do that exact thing, but it's an idea that might generate some positive thoughts among the team. This is a good place to talk about position versus interest, and to recognize the difference between the two and how they're going to work towards getting what you feel you need for your child. So when we talk about the position, this is the position you're taking. I'm not wavering from this. This is the position. If my son doesn't get an aid, I'm going to go to due process. Does it seem like effective communication? Probably not. Um, does the threat seem like it's going to work? Probably not. Due process is your right. But think about, as the parent, what do you really want? Why does your son need an aid? And think about, that's the interest, the motivation behind that want. So when you think more about that interest, you think, I'm worried that if my son doesn't have the aid, he won't be able to stay on task. So that's fine. If you bring up that gives the team, which of course includes you as an equal partner, more opportunity for options. And maybe something's being missed that, it would be helpful to have a one-on-one aid, but maybe there's something being missed that, that can be put into place before we think about having a one-on-one aid. Or maybe it's the fact that, the child does need a one-on-one aid. So bring up that interest, and your position might be one of the options that the team discusses. But bringing up the interest is going to be more effective in advocating for your child. Another position might be, I'm not going to sign that form. So why don't you feel comfortable signing a form? Do you have to ask a question about what the form really means? For example, in an IEP meeting, when you sign an attendance sheet, all that means is that you were there. It doesn't necessarily mean that you're agreeing to anything. It just means you were there. And, now we have forms that say whether you were there in person or whether you were there virtually. But again, what is that interest behind the want? Do you not know enough about what you're signing and you don't want to make a commitment? Schools are supposed to give us all the information we need to be fully informed. So if you don't feel informed, ask those questions. Um, none of us, likely, none of us go to school for IEP advocacy, right? Or for knowing what is in an IEP or what's supposed to be in an IEP or for special education. Most of us don't. So it's natural that we wouldn't know these things and that we would have to ask questions, and that's okay. Again, you have the right to be a fully informed decision maker. So if there's any information you need answered, ask it here at the meeting. Call the Peel Center. We can help you figure that out. But find out the information you need. Your position: I want my child in another classroom. I want them in another school. Well, let's go back to the motivation there. You probably talk to other parents and talk to others to find out what's happening at other schools. Um, and you've heard things positive, negative, but your real motivation is, I'm wondering if being in a classroom will give my child opportunities to make friends. So the interest there is making friends. Um, and we had an educator in our school who would always say, well, we don't have to force friendship. I wasn't looking for a forced friendship. I was looking for opportunity for my child. So for Andrew, that opportunity came through the goals in his IEP that would be set up so that he could gain skills to make friends. He could gain language skills, communication skills to make friends. Um, gain social skills to increase his opportunities to make friends. That didn't mean he had to go to another classroom. Gosh, no. Inclusive education, um, and I'm going to put a caveat here that good, effective inclusive education ensured that he's comfortable in the community now. He has a job in the community now. And it was just that, having the team think about, again, the interest that we as a family had in having him gain social skills was going to be better served um, in his gen ed classes than in other classrooms. So really think about those interests. And if you have a position that, that you're thinking about that you want to bring up to your team, go back and think about, well, what's my real motivation here? What do I really want? And use that as a starter at your IEP team. So identifying your concerns. And sometimes this might take, a little bit of time, and you might want to prep for it instead of going to a meeting and just, trying to do this off the cuff. So you want to take some time to think about what these really are and where the priority is on certain things that you might have that you're concerned about. So, what are you concerned about that requires advocating with the educational team? It could be lack of progress on IEP goals. Now, some of these are things that come up, I think, most often in the individual assistance that the PO Center does for families. It could be that lack of progress on goals, changes in the child's behavior, services that aren't being delivered as planned or as noted in the IEP, or ineffective communication with the school team. This is a small list of things that could be issues that you may deal with in school. And of course, there's a host of others. So again, we're keeping in mind that vision that we want for our child. And the idea here is to bring up ideas to share with the team. Being part of a team sometimes requires um, that we have to negotiate, sometimes realize that you're not going to get everything you want, but think of, again, that end goal. The Peel Center used to have a series of trainings that we called Beginning with the End in Mind. And that's just what we're doing here. We're looking at that vision, that's our beginning, and thinking about how we're going to ensure that that happens. So what are some potential solutions? And again, you don't have to have all this information. This is why we have, people who are educated about the child themselves, which is you, and people who are educational professionals. And we look to them for ideas that they can bring to the team to help us figure that all out. What's non-negotiable? What are you not going to budget on? And that could be that, you want your child in an inclusive setting and he's currently having some behaviors. So we have to figure out what are we going to do as far as the behaviors, but it has to happen in the gen ed setting. So that's your non-negotiable. It's going to happen in the gen ed setting. And how can that happen? And again, what are the concrete outcomes that my child needs? What's going to lend to that vision? I might put a plug in here for the Framework for Advocacy and Belonging from PATN, the Pennsylvania Training and Technical Assistance Network. If you Google those two things, Framework for Access and Belonging and PATN, P-A-T-T-A-N, you should be able to get a link to the framework. What the framework is a guide that is led by a trained facilitator in using the framework to have the team come together and think about what supports does this child need to be successful in the general education setting. And it's more of a systematic way of figuring that out, taking some steps that have been shown to work to come up with those potential solutions. And so when we talk about belonging, we're also talking about inclusion and having the child feel like, inclusion has gone beyond just plopping the kid in gen ed classrooms, right? So it's getting to that piece about belonging, them feeling like they belong there and providing the supports that they need to be successful there. So again, that's the Framework for Access and Belonging. Sometimes they call it FAB, F-A-B, and it's P-A-T-T-A-N, PATN.
Hey, Cindy, there's a question in the chat. Sometimes I've heard it framed as think about your happy ending. What would that look like and what would be in place?
Yeah, so like we said, beginning with the end in mind. So we go back to what's that vision? What do we want for our child? And working towards that. And that's what we'd be, that's our guiding light is, what do we want for our child? And that can change. It's not something that's static. It could be very dynamic. We look at transition, when kids are in Pennsylvania, their 14th year, when they turn 14, thinking about planning for what happens when they're not going to school anymore. And you could start planning at age 14 and your transition plan for your child is going to look like one thing, but by the time they leave, whether that's 18 or 21, it's probably going to look very different. So these aren't static. Same as the IEP. It's it's a fluid document and can change at any time. So any of these things can be changed at any time. Good point. So thinking about what your concerns are, you might approach advocacy in a different way. So how much time do we need to have, how urgent is the matter? How quickly does this have to happen? And, you know, um, I know some of the calls that we get at the Peel Center, someone will say that they've asked and asked for meetings and it's not happening. According to the law, the school has to, respond to your request for a meeting. So different approaches to advocacy could be, you know, um, copying in someone who would be helpful in understanding why this has to happen, or going up that chain of command. We'll talk about chain of command later, but that's what you want to consider. How is your current relationship with the school team? And this is why it's important to have that effective communication. It's really tough to go to IEP meetings and have those relationships and communication with members where you don't have a good relationship. And this is a reason that, we'll talk about some dispute resolution, especially early dispute resolution, because finding ways to preserve a good relationship with the school is important. Is your concern related to special education supports and services, or is it an interpersonal concern? So we'll explore that a little bit. So is it a special education concern? Something like lack of progress on goals. And that is a training that, we could get into a lot of things. And we do have a training on that. But, lack of progress on IEP goals. Call the Peel Center if you have more issues around that. Changes in the child's behavior. Services not being delivered as planned. And again, these are services that are in the IEP. So whether that's a one-on-one aid or related service personnel, things aren't being provided. Evidence-based math curriculum not being used. And again, it's probably going to be worded that way, evidence-based math curriculum. There's not a specific name that will likely be used in an IEP, just because the school and the professionals at the school are the ones that choose methodology. So they're not going to be constricted by a specific math program. And two, if the family were to move away from that school district, we need the opportunity for the receiving school to be able to choose the math, in this case, the math curriculum that they feel is most appropriate. There's a positive behavior support plan that might not be followed, or if there's ineffective communication with the team. These concerns can be resolved by IDA dispute resolution mechanisms if needed. And let's see here. Those would include things like mediation, due process, state complaints. Parents don't really use state complaints, I think, as much as they could. Meanwhile, they're very effective. So again, that's another training, but something to look into and consider. So it's an interpersonal concern. And this is where it comes down to being a good team member. I don't feel as if I'm respected or a valued member of my child's IEP team. I have trouble getting responses to my email questions. Team members seem to have low expectations for my child, and there's ineffective communication with the school team. So while these things can't be resolved through IDEA dispute resolution, there are things that you can do as a team member to ensure that they're happening. And one is, and I know it's hard, I am a parent. I had to go through from early intervention to, uh, Andrew stayed till he was 19. So, all of those years in trying to maintain relationships with the team. And it's not always hard, like any other relationship, it's not always easy. So make sure that if you're not feeling as if you're respected, that you model good behavior and you model what respect to the school looks like. Um, Again, I know that can be difficult, um, but there's a lot of support out there from other families, other parents that Facebook groups. I think that they've been, say what you will about Facebook, but they have been very supportive. Support groups. Um, there is support out there for you. I'm having trouble getting responses to my email questions. Um, Maybe you're not sending them to the right person. So ensure that you're sending them to the right person. Um, and, I find it helpful to include one other person because sometimes, I have had staff that would respond, "Oh, that was in my spam," or, "Oh, I didn't see that." So that's why sometimes I will copy in another person to make sure that they're actually getting my emails. Team members have low expectations for my child. Again, thinking about modeling behavior, letting them know that you presume competence of your child and you expect the same from the school. And that's okay. Asserting that is okay. And ineffective communication with the school team. Um, Again, try and model good behavior. Uh, if you need some help from an advocate in this way, that might be helpful too. But this is going to take more um, finesse and ideas um, that aren't necessarily part of IDEA, but more part of um, good communication skills, let's say. So in our first scenario, we're talking about you're not seeing progress on IEP goals. What do you need to learn more about? Um, and again, Peel Center's here for you. Patton has a lot of good information on there. Even if you go to Google sometimes and look for, progress monitoring, progress reports, what do you need to know? What are my non-negotiables? Regression is a non-negotiable. What effective strategies can be used? And again, these are questions that can bring up to the IEP team. So maybe you need to know how the school is measuring progress and collecting data. Again, something that the Peel Center has a specific training on, but always good for a parent to learn what that looks like. And where do you find that? That's information that you should be able to get and that you are entitled to. So you can ask the teacher. Homework and tests are helpful. Ask for a review of goals and the outcome criterion. If there's something you don't understand, again, ask your team, or you can call Peel Center, we can help you out. Figure out what those questions are to ask. Again, what are my non-negotiables? Not making progress. Effective strategies, revising and reviewing the IEP, increasing communication between team members. And again, that's part of being, a good team member. The team has low expectations. So what are my non-negotiables? What do I need to learn more about? Expectations for students, reasons for low expectations, what assumptions are being made, what can we do to reverse that? I mentioned before Julie Costin, and there's other folks out there who have, um, who are out there who give information on presumed competence. Paula Kluth, lots of information. You can find her at paulacluth.com online, and you know, finding out what those expectations are and being able to meet them. And when we talk about low expectations, um, most times kids are going to meet low expectations, but then where do we go from there? Whereas if we have high expectations for students, they have so much opportunity. If they don't make it to what our high expectations are, that's okay. But they definitely have all this opportunity that they didn't have when there was a low expectation. And where are you going to find that information? Communication with teachers, team members, other documentation. Again, other folks who are in the field who know and have resources for this kind of information. What are non-negotiables? Not presuming competence and not providing those learning opportunities. There's a lot of kids where, it's hard to measure what they're learning, but we have to find ways to do that. And there's so much creativity and so much in school that, as a layperson, so I didn't go to school to be a teacher. Um, I went I went to college for economics, so that doesn't really enter into what we're talking about here. So, can you tell me, school district, um, what are you doing to presume competence for my child? It's things to think about. So, what effective strategies can be used? Positive communication, focus again on the child, and I want to hear those strengths. I want to hear what my child's doing good in school. Request that the school staff be trained on inclusion and presuming competence. There's a part of the IEP called supports for school personnel. Probably it's used by the schools in sometimes a non-effective way by saying, oh yeah, they're going to have some professional development throughout the year. Well, that's already assumed. You don't have to put that in an IEP. We want something that's specific to the child. So if this team is having difficulty understanding presumed competence or effective inclusion, that's what these professionals need some support and some information on. So process and strategies for educational advocacy. And again, this is what the Peel Center has come up with as far as these keystones for educational advocacy. Vision, knowledge. Where are you going to get that knowledge? Yep, from the Peel Center. Preparation and organization. No problem with you coming up with the agenda for the IEP meeting. You know what you want to ask. You want to ensure that those things are going to be discussed and talked about, and that your questions are answered in a way you understand. So that does take some prep and organization. You might want to share the agenda ahead of time as a professional courtesy with the other members of the IEP team so that they have answers for you when everybody comes together. It does take patience. I think one of the biggest things that I've learned in advocating for Andrew has definitely been patience. Didn't have a whole lot of it before I had him, but now you just have to. Active listening skills. We're listening to other people to learn. We're not listening to others in order to respond. Make sure that you're understanding what's being said, and mutual respect. Mutual respect is sometimes it's hard to come by, but this is going to be key in advocating for your child. So you want to educate yourself by reviewing reputable websites, Peel, Patton. Again, that was, so for Peel Center, maybe Heather will put these out. Peel Center, peelcenter.org. You can ask questions at info@peelcenter.org. Patton is patton.net. ODR is the Office for Dispute Resolution. This is where you get all your information about early dispute resolution, mediation, facilitated IEP meetings. I can't say enough about facilitated IEP meetings where, you know, they're actually mediators, but they're acting as a trained facilitator that can ensure that a team that's having difficulty communicating keeps moving forward. This is free. No cost to you, no cost to the school. And that can be found on the ODR website, odr-pa.org. Attend trainings, local, statewide, from Peel, Patton, ODR. Lots of, there's a lot of free advocacy or free trainings, local and statewide. Get on some email lists, find out what those are. Ask questions. Don't be afraid to ask the questions. It's okay. Join a group for anyone who's not familiar with their local task force. Local task force on right to education. Find out more about your task force. Every intermediate unit in Pennsylvania has a local task force that is to be parent run, that is for parents, that is supported by the intermediate unit, and should give parents some of those resources for information they need in being an effective IEP member. The LTFs in some IUs in PA do need some parents to step up and take a leadership role. So those opportunities are always there. And that was basically how I got my job, was being part of a local task force, being in a leadership role, and, just being a leader there. Review your school's website. And, if you have questions about policy, that's the place to find it, is on the school's website. And a lot of information can be used from those policies that are on the school website. Review your procedural safeguards. Procedural safeguards used to be written in a very legal way and were very hard to navigate and to understand. But they are easier to understand now. There's an index where you can find specifically what you have questions about, and they are easier to navigate. And of course, call the Appeal Center, email the Appeal Center if you need individual assistance about an issue that you're having. Prepare, organize your documents, plan, come up with an agenda, share that with the school ahead of time. Write down. Those meetings they're emotional. So there's a chance you're going to forget what you wanted to talk about. Write down your concerns, maybe some solutions that you have, any questions you might have, and rely on that, not an emotional brain when you go into those meetings. Discuss with others who know your child. Feel free to bring them to your meetings. For in IDEA, you can bring anyone to your meeting who you feel has knowledge about your child. The school can't say no. You do not want to bring an attorney just to bring an attorney. That just that doesn't set up for a positive, effective, respectful exchange of information. And keep notes from the people you talk to. Feel free to bring someone with you who's just taking notes. That's fine. No one can tell you that you can't have a meeting just because you bring somebody with you. Keep good documentation. I remember, I think it was when Andrew was in first grade, I started thinking about, I need to get a file cabinet for all this paperwork. So we did get a file cabinet. Keep your documentation. Keep good records. Put things in writing. I think that I would say that's the first rule in advocacy, is to keep things in writing. Email is fine, and it's a great way to have that documentation and evidence should you have to, let's say, file a state complaint. You can keep a phone log of how often you have to call the school. This sometimes helps regarding behavior If you're always getting calls around behavior and you notice that this is a pattern, um, that could be something to start, requesting um, a meeting regarding behavior and issues that you want to discuss regarding that. Save all your emails, have a separate folder that's part of your emails that you're going to put all that information in. Keep a meeting notebook. So sharing the chat, what's some things that you use that you feel are effective, have been effective for you, others might not know about? Please share that in the chat. While you're doing that, here's some tips for written communication. Letters and emails should be addressed to the person who can make change. Find out who that is. If it's not the teacher, if it's not the principal, it could be the special ed director. Maybe the special education director has never been part of your meeting and doesn't even know what's going on in your meetings. Find out. Make sure it's dated and signed. Focus on one or two issues. We don't want anything too long. People tend not to go through and read everything. If it's longer than, let's say, a page or, a couple paragraphs. Take time before, don't do it at a time when you're really anxious or, just really upset about something. Review it by someone else before sending it. So maybe something needs toned down. We can think about doing that. Include a request to reply date or availability to meet. I find this very helpful. When we say we're not getting answers back from folks, I'll ask for, please respond by Friday. And, that way, if I need to follow up, I can say, I asked if this could be, followed up by Friday. I haven't heard back. I'm replying again because I need, include your contact info and preferred time and mode for communication, what works best for you. And consider sending a copy to a supervisor or someone else of authority. Sometimes, as family resource specialists will say, copy our name in on it. You want folks to know that, you are getting help. You're getting help from someone who might be a little more familiar with what the laws are or what's expected by the school. That's fine. Remember to keep a copy for yourself. If you think about filing a state complaint, you usually need documentation and evidence, and that's where that comes from. Know the key players, and this is going to be really effective in communication. Understand the chain of command. So while you might start with the building principal, if you don't get the answer you're looking for there, maybe you need to go to that director of special ed. What I find is a lot of times, not every time, but a lot of times, the director of special education has no idea what's going on at the building level. Sometimes principals aren't as familiar with special ed as we maybe assume that they are. So bringing in that director of special education is going to ensure that, there's compliance in decisions that are being made. If you need to go higher, go on to the superintendent. And sometimes there have been times when certain issues I've addressed with the school board. In the situations I was part of, I would find a school board member who maybe they have a child who has an IEP or is in special education, has a 504 plan, someone who's more familiar with special education. If you don't find that, ask others maybe to find or to learn who on the school board could be helpful. And check the meeting invitation, which you should get it before the IEP meeting date, to find out everyone who will be at the meeting, or if there is a request you have to make for someone you want to be there. We're getting towards the end of our time here. So in participating in meetings, this is really just things that we've already talked about. Take notes, have an agenda, think about active listening, and things to do to ensure that you're hearing everything that's being said and the way that it's being said at the meeting. Again, we see that word respect. The Appeal Center has the communication tips, which gives you that ladder to go up if you're not getting the answers that you need. And the Rights Done Right videos are an easy way to understand what your procedural safeguards are. Find that common ground. Remember, we want to focus on the needs of the student. This isn't a tug of war between family and school. This is focusing on the needs of the child. Don't be afraid to ask for a break. If the meeting's becoming too much, or if you just don't feel you can go on, it's okay to reconvene a meeting. You can have a meeting at any time. I'm going to quickly go through dispute resolution, but know that if you go to the odr-pa.org website, you can find information on all of these items. And if you have questions, contact the Appeal Center. We're all pretty familiar with all of these options, and really look towards those early dispute resolution, like mediation, where there's no cost to the family. Attorneys don't have to be involved to help IEP teams come to a mutual decision. Not a whole lot of time for questions. I'm sure that there's more, and there's always opportunity to call the Appeal Center, email the Appeal Center, to talk to a family resource specialist. There's a link on our website, the Need to Talk. That's just a button at the top that you click. And I hope you got some ideas for effective educational advocacy. You can use your phone, scan our QR code to fill out our evaluation. Heather will send out more information, and she will send out the link for the evaluation after the training today. She will also send out this PowerPoint. So you'll have all this information. Cadre, that's the National Technical Assistance for Dispute Resolution. Really good resource for families, as it is for schools too. COPA, Council of Parent Attorneys and Advocates, excellent organization. They do offer trainings on being an advocate. I might warn you, it's a little pricey. Depending on how far you plan on taking your advocacy, it could be well worth it. Parent Center Hub, all free information for parents. PA's Consult Line, they're not advocates. It's through the Office of Dispute Resolution, but they will let you know what your rights are. Patent, know that the conferences offered by Patent do have parent scholarships. Most times they're going to cover registration. Sometimes they cover lodging. Usually mileage and food, you're on your own, but sometimes food is provided at the training. I know what transition it usually is, but that's a deal. A quick guide to special education dispute resolution is on ODR's website. And we want to thank you, our families.
Hey, Cindy, I'm sorry. There's a question in the chat.
Sure.
Can you say the name of the woman you referenced from Facebook again? And also, what is the name to look up for the task force?
So from Facebook, it was Paula, and her last name is Kluth, Kluth. She has a website, paulakluth.com. Julie Coston, Causton, is fantastic